Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. And okay. Hi, everybody. This is Michael, and welcome to all of you. We have a nice, attentive group. I'd like to welcome Annette, Antoinette, Catherine, Clesia, Diane, Eha, John, Karen, Carrie, Lori, Lynn, Mariut, Martha, Natnie. I hope you can tell me how to pronounce that. Natnie or Natni. I'm not sure. You can tell me. And Rebecca, and Tuija, and Veronica. And here, Joe and I are on staff and trying to make sure that everything works adequately. Well, we have some very interesting material tonight, and it's very profound. And I would suggest I may have gone into it in greater detail in my video book on the entire Esoteric Astrology book. Maybe I did. I don't know. Every time I talk about it, I seem to say something different. So, perhaps there will be new items of information here. And when you compare them with the video book, there may be enough emerging to keep our minds busy for some time. We have to contemplate these matters. That's what the Tibetan has told us. Now, it seems almost inevitable that when we're studying the science of triangles, we will necessarily get into astrology, because whether we're talking about chakras or nations or cities, that is, or planetary centers, or planets, or stars, or even constellations, they're all ruled by different astrological factors and rays. So, I realize we have to, stock our minds pretty well on these matters. It will take some study. And, hopefully when we have our sort of question and answer period, some few things will emerge if they are of importance to you. You may wonder, why do I have to know all this stuff? Well, this is a second ray teaching. The first ray, part of the second ray, is pure wisdom, and it's the Buddha approach. And, given the Buddha approach, you may not need to know all these things. Then the second part is the Christ approach on the second ray, and that is pure love. But then we get into the way Master DK on the third sub-ray, I believe, of the second ray, teaches a special aspect of it, which requires meticulous entirety. Sounds very Virgoan in a way, In other words, you sense the detail of the whole and how it all relates to every other factor, all the details relating in the ray of the divine pattern. That's his particular approach, and I think it's very practical in a way because it helps us manage energies on many different levels. So let's give ourselves a few lives on these matters, and we will begin to accumulate the necessary knowledge that will help us apply it with wisdom, just the way Master DK did. Again, lest I forget, I want to heartily, on behalf of the board of the SRI and USR and Moya Federation and all helpers, invite you to our upcoming conference, which begins with the pre-conference Tuija's ceremonial workshop on the 24th of April. We're just about a month away from all of that, and it goes until May the 6th. So if you can show up in person, I think you will have a deepening spiritual experience, especially since our focus is on the Buddha and the Christ, the Buddha and the Christ, radiant wisdom, all-pervading love. Okay, let's have just a little alignment. Little alignment here as we, in the silence, come together. Really as souls or units of consciousness focused upon the higher mental plane, and bringing that focus down into the personality as the soul in incarnation. But we are relating to each other as, well, more as irradiated minds than anything else at this point. We want to have the mind held steady in the light of the soul, so that the soul can disclose to us its knowledge, its wisdom, its secrets, and so that the personality factors, which are so necessary just to live in the three worlds, do not interfere with the growth of light, soul light. And further, the love of the soul, and further, the sacrificial will of the soul. So as we gather here, some 20-something of us at this time, we try to present a magnetic aura that can attract the light and lead towards further enlightenment, but also reveals the unity in which we stand, and also introduces that factor without which we cannot progress, and that is the sacrificial will, which really opens up when we start to take initiations, and as the 7th, 8th, and 9th petal of the egoic lotus, which you see before you, as those petals begin to really open up, leading us eventually to the 3rd and 4th initiations. Just sound an Om. Okay, now we're going to have a lot of triangles here that we're going to be looking at. You know, their name or their number is Legion. Their name is Legion. Joe created this chart, very good one, and I'll also occasionally use this chart because I've thrown in a couple of other things, but this other one is better. Anyway, so I can't obviously get into the extraordinary amount of detail that the chart suggests, but you can see how many triangles can arise here. The triangles of constellations, each one of them representing a conduit for one of the 7 rays, And some of these constellations appear more than once. Some appear 3 times, some only once, some twice. We have the triangles of orthodox rulers for the more average, non-aspiring person, or that part of ourselves which does not really want to move towards the light. The triangle representing the esoteric rulers of these constellations, or signs. You know, signs are related to the constellations. They are areas of concentrated influence. There's a statement in Esoteric Astrology. I don't know if I can find it, but it does nicely talk about galaxies and stars. So it's going to be one of these two, I think. And let's see. Yeah. And this is something you should always keep in mind. This is on page 621. So, and I think it's probably the best definition of the distinction between signs and constellations. And I'll just kind of make it yellow. In the understanding of the significance of the distinction between constellations as galaxies of stars and signs as concentrated influences from those galaxies of stars, will come fresh light upon the science of astrology. This is fundamentally connected with the difference between the relation of array energy to the triangle of constellations and the human relation. More may not be said, I may not say, but this will give a hint to the intuitive astrologer. So later in the book, he's talking about the will, and it's here that he gives us this distinction, and every planet has its signs, which may be occurring at different times than other planets. However, I mean, you know, every sign will have its own kind of vernal equinox and will relate to each of those signs to one of the 12 constellations of the zodiac. But the real energy is coming from the constellations, and that energy is concentrated for the particular use of the planetary logos concerned. And there are certain devas which are assembled for that purpose, to hold and carry and transmit the energy of the constellations, which the planetary logos receives, to the beings upon the planet, such as a human being, who could not directly receive the constellational energy, at least not, let's say, until the 6th initiation, when the human being becomes a planetary spirit. Obviously, this is all pretty arcane and abstruse, but suffice it to say that even though the vernal equinox is not lining up with the constellation of Aries these days, and won't for thousands of years from now, nevertheless, that area of the aura of the earth, which we call a sign, the sign Aries, does carry esoterically the energy of the particular constellation, even though there's not a direct exoteric alignment. Right in there somewhere, I think page 63 maybe, or 61, is here it is. And, you know, this is something for you also to keep in mind. And you kind of wonder how it can happen, but it does, okay? Because the signs have devas that attract the constellational energy. And he says basically, the month and the sign, or the place of the sun in the heavens, do not really coincide. When we state, for instance, that the sun is in Aries, now this is the really important statement. When we say the sun is in Aries, it conveys an esoteric truth, but not an exoteric fact. See, in terms of just measuring how things line up in the sky, it's not exoterically in alignment, but esoterically it is in alignment, and that area of the Earth's aura carries the energy of Aries. The sun was in Aries at the beginning of this great cycle, but it is not exactly in the same position today when it is found in that sign. So there's a mystery there, but you want to keep page 621 and page 63 of this great book. Keep them together in your mind. So, in other words, a lot of people say, "Well, you have to be a sidereal astrologer to be a real esoteric astrologer." That's not true, because esoterically, the tropical zodiac carries the energies of the constellations, and people look that way. Their form develops that way. Their whole internal structure is that way, corresponding with the signs. Anyway, that's maybe a little digression, but I think an important one. Now, you know, just kind of keep notes, take notes as we go, and see if, when we have time to discuss this, whether the interesting things might be discussed. So, anyway, excuse me, we'll see how far we get with all this. Like I say, Joe has a really nice one, but I want to use this for the moment. Why do I want to use it? Because it's got some veils in it. So with the constellations, or you might as well even think of them as signs, Aries, Leo, and Capricorn, they carry the first ray of will and power. Aries carries the first aspect of the first ray. Leo carries the second aspect of the first ray. And Capricorn carries the third aspect of the first ray. Under Aries, we have, look, you'll be able, this will be recorded, right? So you'll be able to re-study this if you like. Under Aries, we have the will to create. Under Leo, we have the will to fulfillment. And under Capricorn, we have the will which conquers death. From another perspective, we could say Capricorn carries the first aspect, Leo always the second aspect, and Aries, in this case, under the will to create, carries the third aspect. Now, when these three signs are found in someone's horoscope, we are going to have a method by which the first ray can astrologically enter the horoscope. I have two people related to me for whom this is very strongly the case. Both Tuija and my daughter Heidi both have pronounced Aries, Leo, Capricorn. But then remember that on one side of the equation, you have the astrological factors, but on the other side, you have the ray chart. So your ray chart will determine much of how these constellational energies are expressed. Now, the ordinary person in Aries is going to express the power of the personality under Mars. He who goes forth. It is the combative, warring, adventuring, frictional energy. Now, a very interesting thing about Mars is that it rules the entire personality of man, just the way Venus rules the soul. Also, Mars rules the concrete mind of man, Mars rules the astral body of man, and Mars rules the dense physical body of man, but it does not rule the etheric body. This is interesting. Although it rules the personality as a whole, that etheric body is the transmitter of potentially much higher energies, and Mercury and Uranus are the two planets which are particularly associated with the etheric body. So, you know, for many, many millions of years, when you're born in Aries, Mars is going to be the energy that you display, and it is frictional, it is combative, you know, it is full of exertion and strength. It's the warrior energy, and it's oftentimes the external warrior energy. When you have Mars rising, you know, oftentimes Michel Gauquelin, the French statistician, he found you have athletics prominent and people who can really express energy through the mobilized physical body. But millions of years later, when that higher power called the soul begins to exert its pull, and it is recognized in the personality mind, then you have Mercury as the ruler. And remember, you never throw away the earlier part of the triangle. It kind of remains as a base. All Aries people still have a prominent influence of Mars, even though they have moved into the area of evolution, which demands the work of Mercury. Now, Aries is oftentimes called the birthplace of ideas, and so Mercury, which is a planet of intuition, it's a planet of abstract mind, it's a planet of concrete mind, it's a planet of activity. It is well connected with bringing ideas, thinking about them, bringing them down into form. You know, like excuse me for referencing myself here, but, you know, as an Aries type, Mars has always been very important to me, and I've exerted it powerfully for good or for ill. But, you know, reaching a point in my life when I was more interested in ideas than simply in the world of action, Mercury took over. And it's the highest planet in my chart, and it's in Aries, strengthening the fact that it's related to Aries anyway. So the whole idea of this bringing ideas down, living in the world of ideas and trying to bring them down and explain them and make them practical, is a more important part of this life than Mars. Now, hierarchical rulership is interesting. People play around with this in various ways, and, you know, the mind is complex and you can make up all kinds of systems. The question is, are the systems related to reality? Let's just say that in general, the hierarchical rulers have a lot to do with the initiatic state of consciousness and of being and of energy expression. So Uranus is very interesting. Now, you know, Aries is the foremost sign of the will at this time. More of the first ray at this time pours through Aries than through any other sign of the zodiac. And if you start to think about what it takes to be an initiate, you have to begin to relate to the monad. So from the third initiation onward, the hierarchical rulers really are important. Now, what do we know about the planet Uranus? It's usually considered to be a seventh ray planet. Okay, however, monadically, Uranus is the first ray planet. There's only two prominent planets in our whole solar system that have a first ray monad, and those planets are Uranus and the Earth. So there's an automatic relation between them. You might say that Uranus is the very top of the head and the entire head center, and that Earth represents the base of the spine, which it does, among other things. You know, the fourfoldness of the base of the spine. And I want to show you a reference, which is an important one. I'm having a little trouble making it possible to read things here. But in Esoteric Psychology 1, right around page 421, okay, here it is. And you'll see, esoterically speaking, the planets which are the expression of three major rays are ray 1, Uranus. So, you know, esoterically in this case means monadically. Ray 2, Neptune. And ray 3, Saturn. So there are the synthesizing planets, a major, major triangle. And you see this triangle working out in this particular, let's see if I can get it over here. Okay. I'll try to find it. I think I can. There it is. There it is. My Saturn is much older in a way. So you have three big circles, and inside the Saturn circle are a number of associated planetary schemes. But here's Saturn. I could even call it esoteric Saturn in a way. Here's Neptune, and here's Uranus. Here's the 1, 2, 3 monadically of our solar system. So what's really important when you're thinking about how triangles can relate to each other, you have to think not only of the ray of the planet that you've always heard about, but the other rays of the planet, which are definitely there and which DK either tells you about or hints about. Now, when we look at our Earth, lately we can begin to consider it a planet of love, because our Earth has a second ray soul. Now, but usually and often, let's say often, our Earth is referred to as a third ray planet because for millions upon millions of years, the third ray personality of our Earth has been prominent. So Uranus represents the electric fire from heaven. And I don't know why that's happening, but it just does. Okay, so, excuse me, the electric fire from heaven. So it is extremely powerful in Aries, and it is the hierarchical ruler. And the initiate who is living in Aries, either because of his sun sign or maybe because of, because of his rising sign, or most probably later because of the sign opposite the sun sign. In other words, imagine that you're a Libra sun. Then the sun sign opposite your Libra sun is Aries. That represents monadic power in your particular life, this life. It's always changing because your sun sign always changes, but then the monad is 12-fold and needs all the different signs of the zodiac. So this triangle connected with Aries will carry the first ray. Mars has first ray in it, probably on a very high level, probably on the soul level, and from a certain point of view even beyond, maybe. Mercury has no first ray in it, and yet it carries the first ray because it's a transmitter from the constellation Aries, and Uranus has lots of first ray on the very highest level. So, you know, you always have to assess who you're dealing with. If there are aspects between these three planets, and they are, within orb of each other and making interesting geometrical figures, then you can begin to talk about, interestingly, about what is ruling the person's approach under Aries. Will this person be a fighter? Will this person be a thinker? Or will this person be some kind of electrifying magician, bringing the fire of heaven down into manifestation on the earth through the lightning? Okay, so you see how a triangle works out right there. Now, I can see this can take a long time, so, all right. But look, if we, sometimes if you move slower, you're actually moving faster, because we're allowed to bring the thoughts more deeply into our consciousness instead of just racing through the thing and not knowing really what we've done. Now, Leo is interesting because it is really, of all the three fire signs, it is the fire sign which brings in more second ray, because it rules the heart, interestingly, which is a blend of the first ray and the second ray. So more second ray than any of the other fire signs. Aries is the one that is maximally first ray, and Leo is in the fire sign series brings the most second ray. Now, remember that this does not necessarily tell you what your ray chart is. Your ray chart is somewhat a separate matter, and according to your ray chart and how free the rays of the various vehicles are to express themselves, so you will utilize these astrological factors. Now, when you look at Leo, the ruler is the sun, the sun, the sun. But really, the sun and the moon are never really the rulers of any signs. Not really. They are veiling signs. Now, what is a veil? A veil, in this case, is an energy condition which does not allow certain energies to get through or to express or to penetrate. And there are two factors in the human system below which prevent the energies of certain planets from reaching us directly. And those factors are each one of the lunar vehicles, in other words, the etheric physical, especially the physical, the astral, and the lower mental. Those factors prevent the full exposure of our system to the unveiled, naked planetary energies and other higher energies. So that's the part of the veiling that has to do with the moon. The moon rules the lunar vehicles, and they prevent the higher energies from getting through. When you're subject to the moon, subject to those old energies from the moon chain and all that. But now, what about the sun as a veil? Now, obviously, we're not really talking about the sun at all. Matter of fact, the sun is considered a non-sacred planet. That is just a blind. The sun is representing a non-sacred second-ray planet not yet discovered. The moon is representing a non-sacred fourth-ray planet not yet discovered. My old friend and teacher from long ago, Charles Jane, used to say, there's a planet out there called Rex, R-E-X, and then Blavatsky at some point says, the moon is the king of the planets. That's very interesting because Rex means king. So, you know, there's probably an association of the moon with this hidden planet. I don't know if it's etheric or just undiscovered Rex, and of of the sun with a non-sacred second ray planet. But now the interesting thing here is that when we have personality, you know, full personality, you might call it lower ego, lower identity, fixation, that we are the lower personal self, then that prevents the higher energies from getting through. So we're going to say that lower ahamkara, see, ahamkara is how you identify what you are. So if your ahamkara is the sense of, I'm just a personality, and we see all kinds of people that are like that, that attitude, that fixation prevents, excuse me, the higher energies from getting through. So normally what DK tells us is that if you're talking about the sun esoterically, it is veiling the planet Neptune. If you're talking about the sun hierarchically, it's veiling the energies of the planet Uranus. And interestingly enough, DK hints at the idea that the sun orthodoxly or exoterically veils Jupiter. There's a hint there. You know, it's not a confirmation, but I'm just listing it because it is definitely there. So basically, Leo is ruled by the sun on 3 levels and is a sign connected with our amazing solar logos that doesn't have any first ray in its ray structure, although it has all the 7 rays and receives all the 7 rays and transmits all the 7 rays into the solar system. Its own ray structure is probably a 2nd ray, 4th ray monad, a 2nd ray soul, and at this time a 2nd ray personality. That'll change in the next solar system, and I'm not getting into the mind and all that, you know, mind and astral body and physical body of the solar logos. I don't know how I could do that, but we are very much a Davic, angelic solar system. So look, you know, who do you think you are? So here is the first ray coming through 3 levels of the sun. The first level will reveal who you are as a personality. The 2nd level will reveal who you are as a soul, the esoteric level. The 3rd level will reveal who you are as a spiritual triad monad. So these are the 3 levels of identity on which we are working. And when you are born in Leo, identity is a big issue. And ray 1 is a ray which helps to establish your identity, and it goes through all of these planets. Now, Neptune doesn't have any first ray. Uranus does. The sun does not. And Jupiter, maybe. Okay, you know, we can't be sure yet about all the different rays of the planets. But and anyway, at this time, ray 1 is not prominently coming through Jupiter. Although remember that every planetary lord has all the rays, okay? So, but they may not be the most prominent ones. So this first ray comes through Leo with a 2nd ray tinge. It expands consciousness, and it's a triangle which leads us from lower consciousness to middle consciousness to higher consciousness. And the sun Uranus, let's just say, clears away all the debris which prevents us from knowing who we are as a spirit. And the sun veiling Neptune is directly related to the heart of the sun. And our soul nature on the higher mental plane is related to the heart of the sun. Now, what is the heart of the sun? From one perspective, the heart of the sun is the causal body of the solar logos on the, let's see if I can get there, on the first subplane of the cosmic mental plane. Now I'll repeat that. The heart of the sun is the causal body of the solar logos on the first subplane of the cosmic mental plane. And here you have a depiction, I think, of our particular solar logos and its causal body on the first subplane of the cosmic mental plane. So let's see where we are here. So that level of identity relates us to the heart of the sun and to the second initiation. The first level of identity, where we just begin to touch into the soul, and when orthodox rulership of Leo reaches its climax, we have the first initiation, which is ruled by Leo, among other signs. And the third initiation and beyond is ruled by Leo with a subtone of Uranus. The Uranian transformative qualities get through and change us into the transfigured initiate. So this is all about love and light and the second ray as the conduit for the first ray coming from the constellations. Okay. Now, so and there's another triangle, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, or Sun, Sun, Sun. But really, what's behind it is either the Sun, Neptune, Uranus, or Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus. So you look in your chart, you assess your ray chart, you try to, let's say you know you're some kind of Leo person and you know you're a second ray soul, then the position of Neptune as the esoteric ruler of Leo becomes very, very important, especially if Leo is your rising sign. If Leo is your sun sign, then it's more related to the personality. If you're an Aquarius sun sign, then Leo relates to the point opposite the sun, and it relates to the monad. Now look, we're not all of us ready to take on the monad. So even though that point opposite the sun sign is a monadic point, but we can't all use that. We just have to know where we are. Unless we have a pretty healthy degree of building the Antakarana and have liberated the abstract mind and buddhi and the spiritual will and so forth, we're not ready to respond to the monad consciously. Basically, we'd have to be, third degree initiates to do that, or working our way there, almost there, so that it begins to come into sight. Okay, so all of that is the will to fulfillment, a very second ray type of will, but transmitting the first ray of will or power from the first star of the Big Dipper, and it's called Al-Qaid or Bennett Nash. Al-Qaid or Bennett Nash. You can look it up, go to the Wikipedia and look under the Big Dipper, and the stars will be there, and just start at the tail of the bear. And so interesting in the lore of mythology, the bear every once in a while smacks its tail, moves its tail, and then countries fall and cities fall and nations fall. It's so first ray. Al-Qaid, Bennett Nash. Okay, now I guess I'm trying to give us the system here, and I realize, and I'm also trying to make it so that you can absorb some of this, not all of it necessarily, but at least some of this, and see the manner in which we can think together. Now, Capricorn obviously is not a fire sign, and interestingly, when you look at the fire triplicity, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, it's Aries first ray, Leo second ray, Sagittarius third ray. But all of these are conduits for the first ray, the will that conquers death. That's what we find in Capricorn, so it has a very strong first ray component to it. Now, just reminding us, what we should keep in mind is that Aries transmits the first and seventh ray. Leo, at this time, transmits only the first and fifth ray. It's the major fifth ray transmitter, but it won't be for long. Aquarius will take over, and Capricorn is really loaded. It transmits the first ray, the third ray, and the seventh ray. Now, you know, you want to get into the science of triangles, you know, we can do it in a very practical way. I mean, every Wednesday we have, I think, Tuija leads a very beautiful meditation there, and we just get into it practically and send love and send light and goodwill, and eventually the will to good through our triangles networks and through the big network. We can just do it that way, and that's necessary. We absolutely have to do that. But if we want to get into the science of triangles that underlies everything, then we have to memorize a few things and be able to recall them to mind and see what the interconnections are as we, the astounded disciple, stand on the mountaintop and see the passage of the energies. Okay, now the next one, Capricorn, the ordinary ruler is Saturn, and it's a tough life, and you just have to do your duty, and that's it. You know, you're held, confined, the ring pass knot is drawn tight until you fulfill your karma. Okay, so a lot of people don't like living under Saturn, even though it is the planet of opportunity. It makes sure you get the job done. This is, you know, Jupiter will give you a lot of rope, but you might go off and hang yourself with it. And Saturn keeps you on a short leash, a short rope, and you get the job done, and then you're free to move forward. Okay, which is not, you know, the case otherwise. But now it's always important when thinking of planets to think of the different levels on which they work. So the orthodox person, who is pretty much living the life of the personality, and maybe toward the end a little bit transferring off the mutable cross into the fixed cross, begins to feel the soul. The ordinary person is living under one type of Saturn, and the disciple is living under a different type of Saturn, because Saturn is the planet of discipleship, and especially of accepted discipleship, when Mercury combines with Saturn to create the type of mind that you need for accepted discipleship. So here, this type of Saturn is the recognition of an aspect of the divine plan which you can appropriate to yourself, and with caution and dutifully fulfill in your immediate environment. See, if I was to look at, let me go here. Well, here's the whole, excuse me, the Phoenix air always gets to me after a little while. Saturn is ruling quite a number of planes. I'll try to show that to you. Here, okay, so what's this here? Okay, so there we go. Saturn is ruling the entire cosmic physical plane. Now, in Capricorn, in the beginning, you get the earth-bound soul. And on page 333 of Esoteric Astrology, you find out the different levels of expression of the signs. Now, you may be familiar with this, but I'll just go there anyway. Right here. Okay, so I go to Esoteric Astrology, I go to page 333, and there is coming up Saturn. And here, oh, uh-oh. See, don't ever move too fast here. Okay, there's 333. And notice it just stops just before I get to where I want to go. But here it is. Capricorn. This is the average man, the undeveloped man, the earthbound soul. The advanced man takes into consideration the goat fish. It's the goat with the tail of the fish, and is able to cross the waters of the astral plane safely into the world of the soul. And then finally, for the initiate, the conqueror of death, which brings us right into the spiritual will and to the monad. So please remember pages 332, 333, and you'll be able to find out some very important things about the different signs. And you can even have a triangle dealing with the three levels that a sign will demonstrate when working through humanity. Now, you know, a Capricorn person may have, even though advanced, a little bit of earth-boundedness still. And maybe that Capricorn person is primarily now learning that kind of objectivity and control of the will that allows them to cross the water of emotion and not get ensnared within it, as the esoteric ruler would be working. But and then maybe that Capricorn person also is beginning to understand what it means to live as a spirit and become the conqueror of death. The emphasis is constantly changing. So, you know, we all carry bits and pieces. Some of us is, you would say, not so developed. We haven't finished with our development. Some of us is really soul-oriented, and some of us is actually oriented towards the spirit, and it's all in the same person. It's in you and me, and we're carrying a triangle of the three types of response to the particular sign of the zodiac. So, you know, there's lots of ways to do this, and the basic thing is when you're sitting with a person and you're trying to help that person, basically you have to tune in intuitively about the level of development and evolution where that person is now focused. All of these things are possible, but where are they focused? And don't forget, millions and millions of years go, and it's probably not until, oh my goodness, almost 90-something% of our incarnations are gone that we begin to be able to respond to the esoteric rulers, and much later, not much later, but later, the hierarchical rulers. So the great majority of time is spent in the early orthodox and normal rulership. Okay, so let's go back here and take a look. I don't want to not use Joe's. It's so neat. It's very good. And it's someplace else. Here it is. Yeah. Okay. So there you have it, very neat, and you can download it here from the handouts, I think. And there's interesting things here for you in the handouts and the chat, because next week is very important, coming up with the Easter Aries full moon. Okay, but anyway, so that gives you the idea. Saturn rules the entire cosmic physical plane. It also rules the dense physical plane, and in a way, the entire systemic physical plane. It does not rule the emotional plane, but it rules the concrete mind, okay? So, and it's also associated with the first level of the mental plane, where we have the monastic permanent atom. Saturn also rules the entire nirvanic spiritual atmic plane. See, I'm trying to show you how active Saturn is on the cosmic physical plane. So it rules spiritual will in a way. So from a certain point of view, Saturn combines with Neptune, combines with Uranus to give us the three synthesizing planets, a very important triangle, determining how the monadic energy will get through to us. So when you are using the spiritual will to conform to the divine plan and the divine purpose, there's a load of Saturn in there, and you're pretty much an initiate. Saturn also is at work here as the sort of physical permanent atom of the entire cosmic physical plane. So if you're a disciple, you're working esoterically, you are going to work with a concrete mind, you're going to work with the spiritual triad, and you're going to work with the spiritual will. And those are the areas that you begin to become interested in. By the time you're an initiate, you can really work with the spiritual will, and the concrete mind no longer is a big barrier. Now, I want to say, DK said, there's a big tragedy that can come upon people because they make the area of the concrete mind hardened and a separate sphere. It becomes the 13th sphere. So if we go over here to the table of spiritual hierarchies, we will see the danger. This is it. And I wonder if I can make this any bigger. Yes, I should be able to. A little bigger. Okay, look. So we have 7 creative hierarchies here on the cosmic physical plane, but a person who is really determined to be selfish and evil and go their own way, they can use Saturn to make the concrete mind into its own separate sphere, and that would be Saturn. Now, Master Moria says a very interesting thing. You can interpret it how you like. He says, on Saturn, there is a brown spot being prepared for evil doers. That's where they go. So you can see that if one is too bad an individual, Saturn is involved with that kind of negativity. And sometimes you look at the negative parts of Saturn, of Mars, and of Pluto, another interesting triangle, and you can see how the Black Lodge would really use that triangle. You know, Saturn is rigid and unfeeling. Mars is aggressive, and aggression is one of the major ways that the Black Lodge works. And Pluto seeks to control your will. So that particular planet under a negative type, those 3 planets can give you a really difficult situation. Okay, now, but it's not all bad. Let's just take a look here. Finally, the planet Venus enters here. It's the hierarchical ruler of Capricorn. And what does it mean? After you've, scraped and done your duty and been subject to karma and paid all of your debts and all that, after you have cooperated with the divine plan under esoteric Saturn, you climb the mountaintop of transfiguration, and you are introduced to the beautiful light of Venus, which is the beginning of light supernal. Matter of fact, if you have a kind of a combination of the sun and Venus, you really get the light supernal. So in a way, Capricorn, from being a very kind of dark, earthbound, under the earth, just look at Tolkien. He was with the Lord of the Rings and all that, he was a Capricorn, but with Leo rising. And he was taking us under the earth into the kingdom of the dwarves and, all those subterranean creatures in the darkness. But finally, the great mountaintop of light is achieved, and the 3rd initiation is rendered possible through the light of Venus. Now, it's a triangle, but it's lower Saturn, middle Saturn, and higher Venus. So when you're making triangles, you don't only think of them on one level, you think about the different potentials of each one of the planets and what level is it functioning at. So there's so many triangles here, even in the first one. Now, Venus has nothing to do, per se, with the first ray, and yet, because it is a hierarchical ruler of a constellation, Capricorn, which helps to transmit the first ray will come through Venus on that level. So here are all these triangles, and we have to realize how in the Aries type, I guess, you know, I'll try to go faster next time. In the Aries type, all of these contribute to his or her development. It can be the Sun in Aries, the Sun in Leo, Sun in Capricorn. It can be the rising sign Aries, Leo, Capricorn for the soul. It can be the point opposite the Sun, Aries, Leo, Capricorn for the spirit. At different levels of their development, all of these planets give different gifts, and the signs of the zodiac give different gifts as well. So, you know, when these things appear in your astrological chart, you have to balance them with your ray chart over here on the right hand and the left hand. Here's all these astrological factors. You have to learn how to put them together and study your chart intuitively on the basis of these triangles. Now, what DK said is in a chart and how the masters study the charts. Black squares represent matter. Yellow stars represent consciousness, and blue triangles represent spirit. So it's open to us to see how the different levels of our energy system may have potential to act in any one life. It doesn't tell you about what you're going to do in the future, what you've done in the past. You have all kinds of experiences with all kinds of signs and planets and rays and all that in the past, and in the future will have the same. But for now, we want to know how to make the best out of what we're presented with. So look, I realize I've gone on, and I'm not even a Gemini. You know that story about there's this 12-step program for recovering children of Gemini parents, and it's called On and On. Anyway, so let me just say that that's probably enough of the academic stuff, and we'll go faster next time. But what this is now is, okay, just give me a moment here as I try to make myself clear as what I'm doing. Okay, so this is end of SCOT number 11, and I forget how I entitled academic studies section. No, that wasn't it. Academic studies. I'll find out. And I really haven't moved very far at all, but we have to manage to anchor some of these thoughts in our minds. And let's see what page we're on. We just haven't even moved at all. All right. Page 422, it looks like 423. On 423. Okay, so so this is not where I should be doing it. I should be doing it here. Okay, and if you'll just excuse me for a minute, bear with me for just a minute. So this is the end of academic study. section, and it's Science of Triangles, number 11, and number 11, and it's page 423. And today is the I guess where you are, most of you, 23rd of March, 18. And the next thing will be and I'm not sure when, maybe Joe can tell me, beginning of academic study section, SCOT, number 12, page again. Oh my goodness.
2 weeks.
What time? Okay, it's in the morning, right?
Yes.
In the morning? Okay, that's good, because I have to pick up Tuija from the airport. So I can't do both at the same time. But I think I'll make it. Okay. And this is 6 April. We'll have to see whether we do this more often, whether anybody can stand it. Because I know it's a heavy load on your mind. But remember that what at first seems very difficult to do, in the last analysis, begins to make sense, falls into shape, and before long, you're going to be in a good position to assimilate more rapidly than you thought you could. Okay? All right. Now, I think I've laid out the method. I've shown you the different parts of the human energy system that these triangles can relate to. Anatomically, it's the head, the heart, and the knees and the skin in this particular case. But it's more, it's first, second, third ray, it's third, second, first ray, it's personality, soul, and monad. It's undeveloped man or average man, disciple, and then initiate. All of these can be applied to the different stages through which we are passing. But we have to be very realistic about ourselves. What are we passing through, and which ones of these planets and their relationships are most important? You can have this triangle emphasized in your chart, but which part of the triangle should you most emphasize, and which tells you where you can really make progress? Let's put it like this. If we haven't gone a certain way along the path of soul infusion, how are we going to try to bring in the monad? Even though we know the monad is opposite the sun sign in a particular life, it doesn't do any good because we're not yet at that stage where we can benefit from that knowledge. But maybe we find that, in fact, we are, and we can benefit from that knowledge. I would suggest some of you, I'm so sorry. Some of you might be interested in my ebook on Makara called On the Monad. And I think it has a lot of good information. And if you're going to come to the conference and be part of the Advancing 7-Ray Seminar, those of you who are more familiar with the rays, we're going to do a discussion of the rays of the triad and the rays of the monad and how they can be brought into expression in our soul-infused personality life. So we're also doing, by the way, an introductory 7-Ray seminar for the people who are newer to the subject and feel they need a foundation. Okay, lots of good things coming up at the conference. So even if you can't make it in person, which would be lovely if you could, you can get it on our streaming, on our broadcast that we'll be sending out the link for and all of that. So you can still participate. All right, friends, I know I've talked a lot here, and and that's just the beginning. So, and I asked you to kind of take notes and see what might be of interest to you. Did I mention anything which triggered your consciousness, your attention, your questioning mind? Did any formulations arise in your consciousness that you would just like to state rather than question? So this will be the point with my apologies that I managed to do only one ray, but hopefully set a pattern for what is to come up. Obviously, we can do this kind of study for the rest of our lives on the science of triangles. The most important thing that we're doing, of course, is the Wednesday meditation. That filling our relationships with others with light and love and the will to good, that's the most important, okay? But all of this gives you the more cosmic, systemic picture of what's really going on in our larger system, and it will develop your abstract mind, which we all want to do because that's really the beginning of really being able to use the Antakarana and get into the spiritual triad. So we want that. All right, so just be patient. These next 7 years, be hardworking, study hard, apply, read, just get the most out of yourself like you've never been able to do before. All right, now I've talked enough. Are there any questions or any statements that you would like to make? You can do that either by talking, by raising your hand, or by questioning. You can make a question up, and if I can't find it, Joe will direct me to it. So now your turn, and hopefully you've been able to see some of the implications of what it means to work with a major ray, the triangle of constellations and signs through which it passes, and the triangles of planets through which that ray passes and is activated at various stages of evolution. So I'm waiting to see if you have any question, even about the utility of this, any statement, anything you want to say, anything you want to ask. Trying to keep my eye peeled for your response. Okay, Vera, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a question about the egoic lotus. So the petals, like knowledge petals and love and will petals, they spread over those 3 subplanes counted from above 1, 2, 3. But the synthetic petals, the very center of the logos, remains on the 2nd subplane.
Well, to tell you the truth, the whole egoic lotus for people like ourselves is focused on the 2nd subplane as a whole. So, and it never moves from the egoic, from the 2nd subplane until it is destroyed. So obviously, what's being represented here is some kind of access. But for ordinary, non-aspiring, personality-oriented people, the whole egoic lotus is on the 3rd subplane. As we begin to approach the first initiation, and I don't know how many lives beforehand it would be, there is the beginning of the movement for advanced man and potentially first initiation man to have the egoic lotus change its center. And its center then becomes the 2nd subplane, and it does not move, as far as I know, to the 3rd subplane, to the 1st subplane, until it is destroyed. Now, these petals, synthesis petals, they are not developed in the usual way. They come from an inflow of buddhi from the Buddhic plane. Just like the center of the lotus comes from an inflow of Atma and monadic will. So there's a direct connection between the spiritual, all aspects of the spiritual triad, with the 9 petals related mostly to the monastic permanent atom, the 3 synthesizing petals related mostly to the Buddhic permanent atom and Buddhi, and the center of the egoic lotus related to the top of the triad and the monad. And you know, the fact that this is distributed apparently over the subplanes, I think talks about a factor of access. Actually, the focus is the second subplane for all disciples. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And look, you know, let me say something about, you know, and it's obvious that the 3 synthesizing petals are going to relate to the 3 synthesizing planets. Okay? They're going to relate to Saturn first, Neptune next, and Uranus third. They unfold at each initiation. At the first initiation, the first synthesizing petal unfolds somewhat. At the second initiation, the second synthesizing petal unfolds, begins, and the first continues. At the third initiation, the third synthesizing petal begins to unfold, and the Saturn and Neptune petals complete. Now, just before the fourth initiation, the whole thing bursts open and reveals the jewel in the lotus, and that signals the possibility now of the total synthesis and conflagration of the causal body right before the fourth initiation. And from what I've been able to understand, the egoic lotus never leaves the second subplane while that is happening. Some people have said, you know, because they just follow logic, you know, well, then it goes up to the first. The references from DK do not indicate that. The destruction occurs because love destroys. This is very interesting. A limited form of love exists in the egoic lotus, but when Buddhi begins to be accessed as the fourth initiation approaches, that greater love is one of the major destructive factors of the egoic lotus. And so you can see how the second subplane would connect with the Buddhic plane.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a fascinating subject. We just have to be, you know, I mean, what are you going to do? You have to be a strict vegetarian for 10 years, and DK doesn't even advise it, okay, in order to begin to open up the internal psychic faculties, unperturbed by glamour, and see clearly. And then these inner things, the third eye has to begin to open up in order to see these things. And he says from the time of the first initiation, that third eye is already opening, and by the time the third initiation is taken, it can really be used. Okay. And obviously, since the symbol of the fourth initiation is the eye, see, the initiate sees the eye regarding him, the whole idea of vision by the fourth initiation must be pretty well confirmed. Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Okay, Vera. Thank you. Thank you. Any other? Okay, now let's see. What do we have here? Okay, Ecclesia has a, go to the question pane. Okay. Okay, okay, that's interesting. So you're confirming the sun veiling Jupiter, blocking soul inflow through the glamour of love to be loved, okay, operating through my life. And yeah, so you're thinking about that. And well, you know, Jupiter, strangely, you know, a wonderful second-ray soul planet, can really be a planet of exalted ego in the lower sense. Now, DK almost never uses the word ego to mean anything else but the soul. but because he usually just refers to it as the personality, but we call it the lower ego. And we know that Jupiter can subject a person to self-inflation, and they think they are more than they are, and they have all kinds of incorrect ideas about their true proportion in life. And also that whole second-rate thing, you know, if we want to be loved, we don't see with clarity. Our desire to be loved and to look at other people in terms of the love that they might give us or that they might withhold from us prevents us from seeing life truly. Now remember that Jupiter is the planet of exaggeration. You know, it's the planet of excess, of too much. So, you know, to get a real proportion on things, we need good old Saturn and the sign Libra to give us a true understanding of the relative value of things accurately. Jupiter is a wonderful planet. We all enjoy it, but it can inflate our self-image and make it so that we don't really see things in proportion. But this is an interesting angle, you know, on the second ray and so forth. So that's what counts, to have experiences of this nature and then to record them. Okay, thanks, Ecclesia. Other thoughts, questions? See, you know, okay. And Veronica, okay. Please talk more about the difference between the signs and the constellations. Well, okay, that quote on page 621 is really important. So these energies are coming from what DK calls galaxies of stars. Now look, where do they come from? The constellations are in the heart, in the head center of the local supercosmic logos that we call the unknown, or the one about whom naught may be said. And then they have to pass through other constellations on the way down to our local cosmic logos, in which our sun is a heart center, and then into our solar system, and then into the planets related to the rays involved, and then finally to the earth, and finally into our monad, finally into our soul, and down to our personality. But we are not, look, we are not getting the full, untransformed, unstepped down blast of constellational energy. It is being transformed, reduced, made assimilable on the way down. And what the signs are, according to the astrologer Alan Leo, he says, well, take a look at what an orange looks like, you know, peel the orange, and you see these sections. He calls them lunes, okay? Now, these sections of the orange, they're spherical, and each one of them is like differently attuned Davic energy, much closer to the earth and much more able to touch our lives than that tremendous constellational energy that even our sun, our solar logos, might have trouble assimilating. So it's got to be a step down process. And just, you know, for myself, I just say the signs attune with the quality of the constellations and step down the intensity of that quality so that it can be assimilated by the beings of Earth. And we're talking about man assimilating in a conscious manner, but of course all the different kingdoms assimilate. As far as the planetary logos goes, he may assimilate directly, not from the signs, but from the constellations themselves, and thus with the solar logos, but not a whole lot of the beings on the planet. They need concentrated concentrations of the same quality of energy as the constellations give, but much reduced in intensity so that they can be assimilated in these lunes, as Alan Leo talks about them in his book, believe it or not, Esoteric Astrology from 1917. So it's a method of adapting the qualities of the constellations, de-intensifying them, transforming them, making them accessible in still the same quality, but much, much reduced intensity, making them available to man. So, just what these devas are, there are, excuse me, devas attuned to every one of the 12 constellations. And that's their sort of prototype, their sort of archetype, and they are unusually fit to receive the energies coming from the constellations, which are gradually being stepped down, even by the sun, even by the planets ruling that constellation till it gets to Earth. And then they somehow concentrate and hold that same energy, but in a much reduced intensity, and make it available to us at different times of the year and according to our own personal horoscope. I think, obviously we don't know all the details of that process. It's got to be some amazing Devic process involved with energy streams and different levels of cosmic electricity and so forth. But we get the general idea, and that's all that's important now, stepping things down. Okay, so I hope, Anne, that gives you a little something on that. And I see that Tuija would like to say something, dear. So, okay, you're self-muted, so you got to unmute yourself, Tuija. You're self-muted. Okay, I can't do it. There you go.
Right. Good morning to everybody. I was just thinking about something which is related to the devas and about this, the whole idea about triangles and studying that. As we have been mentioning that the triangles relate to the new coming science of invocation. And there is something interesting if one thinks about this idea and looks one chart. All of those who are somehow familiar to your own chart, look your chart in that sense and try to tune into your soul and try to see what kind of invocation you can find in your chart. What are these points in your chart which are activated by these triangles, triangle connections via the signs? Because the soul will always send forth the sound, and there is going to be these Devic forces which are responding. So it's about this same idea of invocation and evocation. How do we respond to what kind of invocation by the soul is going on that we can reveal or open via the looking into the triangles that we can see activated in our charts?
Yes, that's important, Tuija. What I find when I think of devas, now you know a lot more about that than I do, but when I think of devas, I think about the relation between. I think of devas as the rays between concentrated centers. They are like bridges between different points of concentration. So through the bridging of the Deva kingdom, a whole transformation can occur from bottom to top and from top to bottom. And the whole Antakarana, to me anyway, is a bridging Devic structure. And it operates on the principle of harmony. So, it allows us, when things are really harmonious, to tune into higher energies which are harmonious with the notes of the devas within the Antakarana. So we need the Deva kingdom, you know, because man, you know, there's man in the Devas, okay? Man is a pretty much a concentrated, consolidated unit. Man is not a bridging unit until he begins to appropriate the Devic quality. And man needs that bridging quality to reach from center to center to center and appropriate what is high and down into the lower worlds.
Right. So still continuing this whole idea, when we think about the soul desperately tries to reach its own personality and tries to get that under control. So all of that is based upon sound when we study it, that how these Devic forces are set in leash, that they are not just running rampantly, but they are under the purpose of the soul. And when the man becomes soul infused, so then I think this is my idea, I don't know, what do you think about it, that then we first time really become that kind of point who can actually announce. When we think about the white magician, and there is this one image in alchemy where the white magician is standing and all the elements are around him. He is in the center, so he can control all these elements via his sound. So I relate that to the science of invocation, the coming science, because humanity is moving towards the kingdom of God, the soul kingdom, and that is to be manifested. And then when that is manifested, then we become the ones who can sound also here. Now it is the soul which is sounding, and we have to come to be the same in order to use that science of invocation. And that's why I think that DK is talking, it's future science, it's not yet here.
But interestingly, the fourth ray approach, which involves color and sound, is going to be one of the first methods by which contact can be made. And the fourth ray rules the building of the Antikarana, and it rules all bridging processes. So we will be able to use, if we know the right sound, if we know the right color, we'll be able to activate the Devas as bridges between the centers we must reach. And for us, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that now we are very unconscious, and many places in the teaching is about that the DK points out that the first time now humanity has reached the point that it's able to invoke, or it's able to announce something,
right?
Or
it's evocative.
Right. So I looked at that because humanity is nearing in information that's going to be this huge point in the whole evolution in solar logos, because then the humanity on the physical plane has become the co-worker for God.
Very important. And I think another 700 or 800 years in that part of the age of Aquarius, ruled by Mercury, fourth ray, this magical process of bridging will really take off. You know, that's when we'll really see it most prominent and be able to link up all these things by knowing the right sounds, knowing the right colors, tones, whatever, mantrams, etc. Then we can make the link between things. Right.
So the point about this was just that thinking of all these academic, maybe dry technical matters from this point of invocation, and it becomes very interesting from that aspect.
We've got to know, you know, in other words, if let's just say the Space Center, let's say in the United States, if it wants to send a rocket into space, or even a space station, wherever, it's got to know so much technicality to reach from here to there. So we students of the Ageless Wisdom, DK has often said, look, you've got a lazy mind, he says to us. Please activate your mind, activate your lower mind, make sure it is well stocked lower mind, so you can actually help to make the bridge in an accurate manner. Okay, well, we have a lot of work to do ahead of us for sure. Okay, thank you, Tuija. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, is there anybody else that would like to say anything at this point? I know well, look, you know, in my view, DK has written one big book, and it includes the secret doctrine and all that stuff that Blavatsky was able to bring forward, and it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what he knows, okay? So when we can almost bring up anything in occultism, and it's all relevant. Everything that we study is a springboard to further thoughts. So we're studying Master DK's one big book, and it's about to be greatly amplified in another 7 years, because he talked about the new astrological teaching, which would come out in the year 2025 or thereabouts, and immediately beyond. So we have some amazing stuff ahead of us for the next 100 years or so, bringing us to the end of the age of Pisces and the true beginning of the Aquarian age. Okay. Well, look, friends, I'm glad you're here. Don't be daunted. Don't be daunted by this material. You know, whatever a human being has done, a human being can do. And, you know, it's just a question of deep familiarity with what the Master has given, and a very careful reading, and really caring about it, you know, reserving that hour of study every day. Or, you know, when I was young, I would study for 10 hours a day till I got dizzy. You know, I don't know that I would recommend that, but, you know, I was so interested in this material. I went to Olcott, it's sort of the center, was it Center AJR Olcott in Wheaton, Illinois. And of course, you know how a lot of theosophists feel about Alice Bailey. They think that maybe is not quite, you know, not quite right, but still they keep it in the library. I had to reach so high in the bookshelf to get to those books that I could barely reach them. They had positioned them out, literally out of reach. But I got a hold of them, and I've been deeply, deeply interested ever since, combining it with the secret doctrine and other things that have been written by prominent theosophists. Meditation, study, service. It's a triangle, and no aspect of it can be neglected. So, you know, if you finish with the Arcane School, or you finish with the Moria Federation, something like that, and you say, now I don't have to study anymore, that would be crazy, you know? It's just the beginning. And, you know, let's keep on stocking the mind with these connections and meditating according to our understanding of the plan, and helping people however we can from the esoteric perspective, especially. It doesn't mean we would withhold our help in the ordinary sense, not at all. But, you know, we are in a position to help from the esoteric perspective. So that's how we try to help and familiarize human consciousness with these new ways of thinking, being, radiating, etc. Okay, well, look, friends, I tell you what, let's just have, now look, this will be on, I don't know how we're getting this onto Makara these days. Joe, is Brett putting them on still?
No, I send these out. It should be out tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Up on Makara.
Thank you. All right, and then we have to also get the link. People have to know the link where to go. So, tell your friends what we're exploring. They're welcome to listen to these videos. You yourself are welcome to listen to them again. If I had time, I would, because there's a lot of information here that should be assimilated. And we'll carry on with this the next time, and I'll move faster. I promise. I promise. We'll see if I can keep my promise. I think so. So let's just have a closing. So we think about the Great Triangles Network. It even includes galaxies. We don't know anything about that, but you can be sure that our Milky Way galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy and one other galaxy are somehow situated in a great triangle. But down we come, and more into our own area, and our own one about whom not may be said is probably, in triangles itself, and the parts of it are, and we know that the different constellations are in triangles. DK is giving us some of that. Remember, in the head center of this great supercosmic logos is the structure we call the heart and the head, and it's made of the zodiac of constellations, and there's all kinds of interrelated triangles between them, most of which we don't know anything about. But DK has given us some, and down into the cosmic logoi, who represent the normal chakras of this one about whom naught may be said, constellations like the Great Bear, the Little Bear, the 7 Pleiades, Orion, let's see what else. Oh yes, the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one, and maybe Sirius considered as a constellation. He sometimes talks about that. Anyway, there are these cosmic logoi, and they are all related to each other in triangles. And we, come down into our solar system. Our solar logos is a heart center in our local cosmic logos that who is also in a way one about whom naught may be said. And inside our solar system, the sun is related to 2 planets, and other 2, and other 2, and other 2. And the planets themselves are interrelated, forming triangles. You could go like this, you could do this. You could do Vulcan, Mercury, Venus, Vulcan, Mercury, Earth, Vulcan, Mercury, Mars, Vulcan, Mercury, Jupiter. See, you could take 2 at a time and relate it to a third, and you have a bunch of triangles, either prominent or in formation. And on every planet, you could come down right into the planet and look for the planetary centers and the different kingdoms which manifest all through. There's triangles between kingdoms. And we have New York, London, Darjeeling, New York, Geneva, Tokyo. The major planetary centers are there. If we came down even further, we would find growing triangles between cities. Not all cities are planetary centers, but eventually between different cities will come triangular relationships. And now we get right down into our human nature. The major triangle there is the monad, soul, and personality. But we have all these chakras which are triangularly interrelated, and thus it is everywhere we look. The great web of space, especially with regard to our planet, is being transformed from a pattern of squares into a pattern of triangles. So let's just, just try to imaginatively behold that amazing interlocking of the different aspects. We have triangles on their own level and triangles consisting of different levels. Like we might have, a planetary triangle would be on the same level. But what if we have a star in there? And then what if we have a constellation, a star and a planet? That happens too. The whole thing interlocking for the transmission of energy. And when our etheric body, us little people here, when it is triangularly coordinated, then the soul energy, the triadal energy, the monadic energy, all of them triangles, will be able to be rightly transmitted right on through us to the dense physical plane. So begin to think triangularly, and see what you can do as you find different people to whom you relate and with whom you feel as a soul-infused personality, or infusing anyway. You could transmit goodwill, light, even the will to good. Be on the lookout for triangles which are just ready to be declared, and take the 10 minutes a day it takes to go over your list using your imagination, sounding the great invocation, and feeling this relationship with deep spiritual intensity. And then we can become real triangle workers, practical workers, and also with theoretical understanding, workers with theoretical understanding. So what I'm going to do now, offer us the chance to say together the great invocation. Thinking of the Triangles Network, thinking of our own little Triangles Network, even if it's just one triangle, but transmitting the potency of this invocation through our participation in one or more triangles. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men. the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Thank you, everybody. Very happy that you're here. Next days are going to be very full. We will, if you're a Blue Rose sister or Shiva brother, we're going to have our Annunciation of Mary Day coming up on the 24th, Saturday the 24th. And I don't know, Tuija, what time is that? Do you know? Anyway, we'll try to send that to you if you're in the Blue Rose Sisterhood or would like to be a member of that. You let us know. And then the next week, wow, we have all kinds of things. I'll be broadcasting the Aries Solar Fire Ritual on the 28th at 5 p.m. GMT. There's going to be a Last Supper service, 7 p.m. GMT on the 29th. The Aries pre-full moon will be early in the morning, GMT on the 30th, and a Good Friday service later, 8 p.m. Then the Aries full moon itself at 12:36:45 p.m. GMT, and a resurrection service on the first day of April. Friends, thank you, and we wish you well and a concerted effort at this time, this intensifying time of when the new astrological year is beginning. So many blessings, and we'll see you before long. Hopefully you just check your big schedule that we sent out to most everybody. If you don't have it, write to Tuija and me. We'll make sure you get it, and we'll try to send out reminders to you as the events occur. Okay. Thank you. See you then. And bye-bye.